If you have experienced grief or loss in your life, there is a local nonprofit that is hosting a Grief Experience Summit in September that can offer you some tools for healing. Here to tell us more about the event and the mission of her nonprofit is Maria Brown Spence, the CEO and founder of Hearts2Heal. Good morning, Maria.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being with us. You and I have been chatting off camera, and boy, you have a lot of information to give people about grief, so I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. First of all, let's talk about how the nonprofit got started. Tell me a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, so my journey, Hearts2Heal, was incorporated in 2019 after two significant losses. So the first loss was my grandmother. She had stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and so that was my first introduction to one, cancer, and two, losing someone that was one of the most important people in my life. Was connected at the hip to my grandmother and had never really experienced any significant loss up until that point. The second loss was my significant other. He was diagnosed with diffuse large B-cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, an aggressive form of blood cancer right here in Austin, and he passed May of 2018. And so what I found out was, one, what everyone knows that has experienced grief is hard. There is no magic remedy that can ease that for you. We're constantly finding ways to move forward. But I will say that when I experienced my first loss, I didn't want any resources. I just wanted to be stuck almost in this space of sorrow, as if that was a way to stay. I still love my grandmother and she's still here with me and I have to grieve her very hard. But you don't have to do that. And that's what I found out in my second loss. Because my first loss was so painful, it was so tumultuous, I knew that I couldn't go back to that dark place that I had been when my grandmother passed with my boyfriend. So everything that I did was trying to uplift him through the experience. I started proactively seeking out resources. So how can I get into yoga and meditation to just find a way to still my mind? How can I talk to people about what I'm experiencing? Because talking with other individuals is so important. And so Hearts2Heal came from a conversation with my mom, and I said, Mom, there are so many hearts that need to heal. Like, grief is terrible. Like, this does not feel good. And organically, that's how it came to be. It started with me on social media, sharing about my grief experience, and I was getting an influx of other individuals who just wanted a place to share. They didn't want you to tell them it was going to be okay. They didn't want you to lead them to therapy, which didn't happen for me until almost 9 years after my grandmother had passed. And that was really when my boyfriend got diagnosed, and I said, okay, I need to try something different, because what I did then when my grandmother passed did not work. And so that's where Hearts2Heal came to be in 2019. And then 2020, something happened called COVID-19.
Oh boy, yeah.
And so as we're getting this nonprofit off the ground, we are getting thrown into the world of grief and loss in a way that the world has never experienced before. But it was also a great time for Hearts2Heal to be launched, because we were able to impact people in a positive way by introducing virtual support groups and conversations, just spaces for dialogue. We were able to have hike and heal, so we were socially distanced and masked and just still creating community. And so we did find during the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic and COVID-19 that people wanted to talk about grief in a way they had not before, and acknowledge that, wow, there may be some things I've experienced that I never quite processed in the way that I needed to, and are working to do that now.
So many follow-up questions to this, but a big one for me that, as we were talking off camera, I was surprised to hear you mention, is that I think COVID's a great example. There's more to grieve than just the loss of a person or a beloved pet or a friend.
Yeah, exactly. And so Hearts2Heal is really on a mission. That's why we have the grief experience, because there's so many experiences of grief and loss, to show you that it's job loss. It's acknowledging that, wow, my livelihood has changed. It is the friendships that we lost during the pandemic, and still we're identifying new ways of healing, and sometimes that means leaving people behind or situations. It is the loss of financial stability. And so even with the loss of my partner, we went from 2 incomes to now 1 income. And so also what we want to provide are tangible resources. So how can I re-budget my life now that my financial circumstances have changed? How can I do a 5-minute makeup or hairdo because I barely want to get up in the morning and go to work. And so that's where the grief experience came from, is acknowledging that there's so many experiences of it that aren't just death related.
Absolutely. And so I'm glad you mentioned a couple of these things. It's not just, to your words, sitting in a room and being sad. Let's talk about how active you are in the grieving process with Hearts2Heal.
Yes, so like for example with the job loss, we brought in recruiters and resume reviewers and mock interviewers to also show you, yes, it's great to talk about these things, but how can we proactively work to get you in a better situation? Because once you're in a better situation, then you can focus on all of the other things. We talk about self-care being so important, but if you can't afford to take a PTO day, or if you can't afford to go to therapy, then you're never going to get through the place that will allow you to be 100% you, because you're focusing on the small things that it's livelihood. And that's what's the hardest part, is taking away the financial aspect to really get to where you need to be. And so that's what we do, is also bring resources available to you that aren't just around therapy or talking to you at a panel. We want to have tangible resources, because sometimes just hearing it is not enough.
Absolutely, and you've given me some really good examples of, two incomes down to one, or not having health insurance. These are some things that you might need actual help with. Let's talk about, though, some other ways that you can help, because, for example, you're offering teletherapy at a very good price to, Austinites.
Yeah, I think the great thing about therapy, and again, I didn't go to therapy right away. I kind of needed to figure out what this new space of grief looked like for me. But once I did get into therapy, I really found out it was helpful for me. It was an unbiased space to let go and talk about all the things that I was going through without burdening my friends or my family, who did have to hear it repeatedly what I was going through. But through my therapy sessions, I was also able to get tangible resources. So I'm having a hard time getting up in the morning. Okay, well, let's set your alarm to a song that you enjoy that gives you some positivity and an uplifting spirit. And that's what I did. I had a therapist who understood what it meant for me spiritually to have my loved ones still here. So previously I went to a therapist and said, well, it sounds like you're having a hard time moving on. I said, well, I don't ever want to move on. Like, my loved ones are going to be here with me forever. And so I found a therapist that says, what does it look like for your loved ones now? Where do you imagine that they are? And how can you stay connected to them? And so I see a red robin. I'm like, oh, look at my grandmother. She's hanging out. Or I go to Lake Travis, where we went with my boyfriend for the last time. And I sit there and think, and I talk with him. And so for me, it was finding someone that understood what loss meant for me, and also the relationship to the loved ones that I had. So that's kind of where the therapy aspect came from, is knowing that sometimes you need a little bit more than what your friend can give you or what a yoga class can get you. And I didn't want anyone to have to worry about financial burdens when it came to that. So we do offer teletherapy for anyone in the state of Texas. You can have your first 3 sessions free, and then after that, they're only $15 a session. But if you do have a challenge, even with $15 per session, don't worry about that. We will make sure that you get the support that you need. And so we do have therapy sessions available in both English and Spanish.
Stay tuned for more on our conversation with Hearts2Heal after the break.